everyone. It's Obi Abuchi here with the Leading from Your Core podcast and Vodcast. This show is dedicated to helping leaders all around the world discover leadership wisdom, stories, and insights that will enable you to tap into the power of leading from the inside out. And I'm delighted to welcome on the show Nicky Burns-Muir. Nicky has been the executive chief nurse at Milton Keynes University Hospital since April 2019. And not only has she got a breadth of knowledge and experience leading teams in a high-pressured environment, and we'll be talking a bit about that shortly, she also has boatloads of compassion and is committed to authentic, visible leadership. She's the executive lead for the BAME network and committed to the equality, diversity, and inclusion agenda within the workplace for staff and patients. And she's led organizational change using a coaching style to empower staff to achieve their own and the wider team's full potential. Nicky, I am really excited to have you on the show. So thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Obi. Thanks for inviting me. I'm very privileged to be here and hope I can share some wisdom that somebody might be able to use.
I'm sure you will. Nicky, I just want to start off with this. One of the things that I often talk about is just resilience in the face of adversity, right? And if there's someone who knows that, given your role in the NHS, and we're recording this 2022 and we're in a post-pandemic world, but we're still dealing with the fallout of that and the challenge of that. And we have talked a lot about the people at the front line, and you were absolutely one of those, and your team at the front line. And so I'm sure there'll be a lot to just share about that. But so I want to go there shortly, just hear some of your experience of the last couple of years and what you've learned and how you've just grown as a leader. But before that, just so that our listeners and viewers get to know who you are, is there anything else that you'd like to share about yourself other than what I've already said?
I would say that, so I've been in the NHS 36 years. And I've done a range of jobs, and I've moved around the country, and I'm actually an adult trained nurse, and then went and did my paediatrics, so children's nursing. Mm-hmm. And I spent predominantly my career doing children's nursing. And I've had an amazing career. I've met some fantastic people, and I feel very privileged to call myself a nurse. And I think that's part of my central being, really, is a life of service. It feels very different now why people choose careers, but at the time that I chose my career, I definitely felt like that was my calling, to be a nurse. I've had some days when I feel a bit tired, or I could do the day off, but I can honestly say I've never had a day when I've not wanted to go to work. And I think I consider that to be really powerful. Because I know people that have to do jobs they don't really like, and that's really quite soul destroying, isn't it? But you have to do it. You've got bills to pay and mortgages, but actually I've had a great career. I've met some amazing people that I've worked with, people that have worked for me, and also patients and families. And it is a privilege being a nurse. You meet people at the most vulnerable time of their lives, and you have to have an instant connection, and that is a privilege to help people through that. I'm in a different position now, in that I'm a chief nurse of a hospital where I've got a number of nurses that are vicariously doing that now. And so my real job as a leader has grown into developing those leaders that are out actually delivering the care, because I'm not doing that as much now. So yeah, but I think I've done some very diverse things. I've worked abroad. I've gone into some very difficult communities, so homeless communities, travellers communities, and just really experienced people's different value sets, different cultures. But brought me to the place that I am now as a leader, and it's provided so much richness. I've learned so much from other people actually than I've learned myself. But yeah, so just that it is a very diverse role being a nurse. It takes you to many places.
Sure. Wow, I love that. It's I loved hearing your reflections, and what stands out to me already, you use the word privilege a few times. Just, it's a privilege being a nurse, just being able to serve people in this way. And this is just an interpretation, a sense that I get, that must have been something that has helped you navigate all of the challenges, that you see it as a real, I get to serve these people, I get to help these people. So that gives you the fire, motivation to keep going when things are difficult. That's just the sense I get right from the get-go hearing you say that, because it'd be easy to hear people say, oh wow, the task, and I think of all of the things that I've got to do, and having to help that person. You can see the difficulties, but you see the privilege with it, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I think I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm not even half cup full, I'm 3/4 cup full. And yes, drive my family mad sometimes. They're like, oh, here she goes, there's going to be a positive in this, isn't there? And and I think that has enabled me to keep moving forward, even particularly in the last 2 years, but before that, coming across a lot of challenges. And actually, I think, having listened to your podcast with other leaders, it is very different. It's very emotive doing this role. And actually, when you come across challenges, it's not about me. It's about people that have come to the hospital that need care. They haven't chose this situation. So it's about putting others before yourself, really. And that's what drives me, to make sure that we are delivering really high quality care and people are getting good experiences, and we're supporting them, like, as I say, through the vulnerability of their lives.
Wow. Yeah, I again, that speaks volumes. One of the things that I talk about in my book, business, the work that we do with leaders, is about, I've worked with leaders around the world and see leaders in two camps. There's the egocentric. It's about me, what I'm trying to build, what I'm trying to achieve, what I'm trying to drive. And then you've got leaders in the other camp, which is, hey, how can I serve people and how can I make a difference? And some people might listen to this and say, well, of course, Nicky would be in the service camp because she works in, as a nurse, and but actually, that's not the case, right? You can have, and it. I'm sure
there are lots of leaders in the NHS that are not in that camp whatsoever.
Absolutely, and I've spoken with some, and that leads to burnout quickly. I've also just know so many leaders who are in the corporate field, for-profit organizations, and have really connected with service. So just for our viewers, this isn't about, the specific industry that you're in. It really is about connecting with something so much deeper as well. What's your sense, Nicky, on, because you talked about being an eternal optimist, right? Half, 3/4 full, probably 7/8, I get the sense with you, rather than even more, maybe just a drop that's out. But do you think that's something people can learn, that they grow into over time, or do you think it's innate?
I think part of it is probably my value base, where I come from, and I think as you grow as a leader, you need to find some really great mentors. I've had some amazing mentors over time, and coaches, and you can grow it by putting yourself in situations where you don't always agree with what others are thinking, because it stretches your mind. I really like it if somebody doesn't agree with me, because I think, oh really, why are you thinking that, and where did that come from? And I think you have to, so the vulnerability stuff is key with this. You have to be able to say, oh, I don't understand that, or tell me a little bit more about that. And and because actually if you allow that, you allow people around you to do that. And then actually I'm an extrovert, so I externalize all my information, and my best ideas come from when I'm having conversations with people, because I think, oh, that's it. Because actually you've had that richness of conversation, and the more diversity you have around the table, the richer the conversation. So I think some of it is me. From quite an early age, I had a fantastic aunt who taught me to read, and I'm a really avid reader. And that's the other thing, leadership is a never-ending journey. Even now, I don't sit with my feet up in the office thinking, well, I've got where I need to be. I'm constantly reading things and thinking, that's an interesting concept, and how did that work? And the first book that she gave me was To Kill a Mockingbird, and that was the very first time that I recognized people were treated differently.
Wow.
For having like a learning disability, different culture. And that set me on a road of champion people that are not represented properly. And I think, particularly now as doing exec lead for the BAME network, and I've got chief nurse fellows, 5 BAME chief nurse fellows who are amazing. That's the best part of my week when I do, they call it Nicky's toolbox. I do coaching with them and strategies and trying to develop them. Because that, I feel like, because I'm a white woman of privilege, that is my absolute responsibility to lift others. And actually you get more from doing that than doing it for yourself. Actually, well, I do anyway, when I'm doing my work with across the organisation. But I think you have to constantly be on an improvement, wanting to improve your leadership all the time.
Sure. And
really, so I do reverse mentoring, which is where I've got junior nurses. So I've been 36 years, as I say, so a newly qualified nurse. And I've got a number of those, and I've got quite a few Black nurses that are newly qualified that I reverse mentor, where they will give me their view about, are we saying it in the right way? I don't always, I want to learn that and make sure that we are being inclusive. So you can have diversity, you can have a lot of diversity, but if you don't have inclusivity, you're just ticking the box, in my view. And so actually, to get the mirror back from somebody that is completely in a different place, they've just started their training, because the decisions I make up here impact them. And so actually you have to have vulnerability for that. I know some of the senior leaders that I know are not as comfortable with that. But I think you have to be comfortable with being vulnerable, and then that allows you to grow as a leader.
Yeah. Some incredible things there. So obviously one thing I think that is comforting for anyone listening to that is that if you're curious and if you're committed to growing, then you can continue to develop, and it should absolutely be a never-ending journey. There's always more to discover, there's always more to learn, there's always more ways that we can develop. And I love the fact that for you, just the impact you're having on others, the coaching, the reverse mentoring, it actually gives you a lot of energy just from and that satisfaction, knowing that you are using your privilege, your gifts, your experience to help serve others. And that's clearly, it's just this underlying theme with you about serving others and making a difference to others. And you've also touched on, we've already talked about the fact that this isn't just typical. So everyone might think, oh yeah, every single senior leader in the NHS, that's not typical. There are leaders who it is that there is more of that ego driving what they're doing. And what helps you keep your ego in check? Because you've got 36 years, you are in a senior position, you could really ride on that power. But what helps you keep it in check? And what do you think others could learn from that?
So I'm very aware of power. Wearing a uniform is powerful. Being the senior nurse is powerful. So I'm really aware of, when I'm with people, sitting down and a whole body language, and and I talk to my senior team about appropriate use of power. And so I'm very conscious of that. I think particularly as when you're in a caring profession, we very much focus on the caring elements. What we don't think about is communication situations. And I do spend a lot of time thinking, what do I need out of this meeting and how do I get it in a way that isn't about me saying I'm the chief nurse and I'm going to have it. And also I've got really good people around me that because I allow them to, that vulnerability piece that I was talking about, they will challenge me, and I welcome challenge. And lots of people say that, but they don't really mean it. But I do actually welcome the challenge, and that keeps it in check. And also my family don't actually care what my title is when I'm at home. That's irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I've got some very good close friends that will bring me quite easily down to hang on a minute, because you're right, you can get a bit carried away, and it is a very powerful position to have, actually. So I think I'm just constantly aware of that. And that's why it's all signs and symbols, isn't it, when you're with leaders? But that's why sometimes I wear uniform and sometimes I don't, because it's being very cautious that you're not using that as a vehicle to exhibit power. Sure. So I think it's being aware of it. You must be aware of that at all times. And I don't always get it right. And there's times then that I have to go back and say, I misread that. I hope that didn't come across in that way, or give me the feedback. And then it's when things, I think as leaders, when things go wrong, you first have to look at yourself. Did I not communicate that well? Did I do something wrong in this scenario? You quite often will hear people say, oh, I don't know what the issue is. And you've got to look at yourself. And that's what I constantly reflect on, whether that worked well or it didn't work well. Did that communication, did it land properly? So this thing about active listening, getting people to feedback, what do you think I'm saying to you? What did you take from what I said? I think is a key skill as a leader, because we have lots of communication exchanges, but we don't always check that it's been received. And I think that's part of the power as well. During the pandemic, I had to go to my uncomfortable side of power, because we didn't have a blueprint during the pandemic. We'd not done this before. I'd never done it in my career before. And we didn't have the time to be collaborative and say, what do people think and how should we do it? And I really had to be out front as the leader, not actually quite knowing whether I was making the right decision or not. You know, the whole of the country were told to hide away. We were asking our staff, so particularly nurses, to run to the problem. And that was extremely hard. And because of the relationships that I'd built with my team, they trusted me. There's this sort of psychological safety of trust, isn't it? When you invest in people, they do have a trust. But I took that really responsibly, that I could have asked them to do most things and they would have said, might not have been terribly happy, but they would have done it. And it was about making sure that I wasn't overusing that. But I found it quite uncomfortable at times during the pandemic, because I really had to do the, autocratic, we're doing it, because we just had to. But I put myself in the front. So there's a few things that I sort of align myself to as a leader. So during times of crisis, you stand in front of your team, and during times of celebration, you stand behind them and push them forward.
I love that. Wow, that's a powerful one. Just during times of crisis, you stand in front, and during times of celebration, you stand behind. It's celebrating them when things have gone well. Hey, couldn't have done this without the team, and there's a crisis, I'm going to go first. I'm going to put myself in the line, right? The firing line, so to speak, that's a really powerful way of thinking about our people and our teams. And I love the fact that you said earlier on that some people say, hey, yeah, give me feedback, and I welcome the challenge, but in reality, do they create that psychological safety where people feel, but if I challenge Nicky, if I challenge Obi, if I challenge whoever, what's the comeback? What's the pushback? And just from my experience, you've got to be really intentional about creating that sort of environment, because it's sometimes it's also what isn't said. If people feel, oh, nothing's ever said about this, then they think, oh, it's taboo, then I can't say it. And so you've got to really draw it out from people, which sounds like you do. And I also just love that acknowledgement that we don't always get this right, and that's okay. That's part of the journey, that we don't always get this right. I think, it's not every day that we get to chat with the people who are at the coalface of COVID and all of the pressures and challenges. I'd love to hear more about what you learned yourself about your resilience and about what is needed in difficult situations, because you said, and for many people in our lifetime, this was something we've never experienced before. So you're doing something new. What did it teach you about your resilience that you didn't know already? What were some new things that you discovered about yourself as a leader?
So I think the mental resilience, I think it taught me a lot about how you need a bit more self-care, I think, because I think it's because actually 2 years of the pandemic in the NHS has felt like 4 years. And I hadn't been a chief nurse that long when we went into the pandemic. So I had a very steep learning curve. And I think I've always been very self-sufficient and driven about being a leader and my career. I think what it taught me is that you do have to take your foot off the pedal sometimes, and you do have to let other people help you. And you do need that pastoral care. Even if you're the leader and you're the top leader, you need that. And you need people to see that you need it as well, because it sort of gives them permission. Sure. So during the pandemic, we did a TV program. Ross Kemp came to look round, and just to try and help people to understand what was going on, because we weren't even having visitors and people's relatives were here and they didn't really know what was happening. And he kept using the term heroes, and I did say to him in the program, you have to be very careful with that, don't you? Because then that sets people to think that they have to do it. And not everybody could do it, actually. They found it incredibly difficult, because for the first time it was about coming to work and being in healthcare where something could impact your family when you go home.
Wow.
And it was very humbling, because many of my senior nurses moved into a hotel because they'd got a vulnerable adult at home and stayed in the hotel for months on end so they could come to work. They could still come and run the wards.
Wow.
And so I think all of those things enabled me to be the leader that I was. I also had quite a difficult situation going on, which you're aware of, aren't you? My husband was very unwell at the time. So I think I learned to compartmentalize things as well, which is sort of good on a short term when you've really got to focus on a task. But I think inevitably it can cause trauma. And I think everybody that's been through the pandemic within healthcare has been inevitably changed in some way or other over the last 2 years. And I think it has led to sort of fatigue. And it's like being it was a bit like being in a war zone, really. It gave me a bit of a taster of what it must be like being in a continual conflict situation, because it was changing so rapidly. And it's a political hot potato, isn't it, the NHS? And yes. So we do get kicked around the park a little bit, depending on what's happening. And it's a bit, so people were clapping for the NHS, which is lovely. Now we're out of the pandemic. We're trying to catch up with everything we couldn't do because of COVID. And now we're back in that political, getting kicked around the car park again. And but the people are still coming. And so I suppose, I think what I've learned is I'm taking a sabbatical in June. That's what I've learned. I need a month off to let my brain rest, because I had to do what I had to do at the time.
Sure.
But I feel now that I need a little bit of reflective time to really then think about what happened, because I think we've all parked it. And I think we need that. So that's the resilience piece for me. I think it made me become really aware of that. And I even now, when I look back after what happened during the pandemic, and sadly my husband died in the middle of the pandemic, And when I look back now, I don't actually quite know how I did it. I think I just powered through it in the hope that and in some ways, and this is a funny thing, I was saying to one of my friends the other day, that my husband dying has become a bit of a superpower, and which probably sounds a bit odd, but I don't really care what I do or say now, and that doesn't mean that I would say anything to offend anybody, but I think, what is the worst that could happen now? I'm braver because it's already happened. So it's made me a lot more brave about saying things. I don't really like, as a leader, I don't like conflict. I don't mind challenge, but I don't really like conflict. But I've learned to be more comfortable with conflict, because actually often you get a good outcome from it. But I think I probably could have worked for the UN previously and just tried to be the smoother, the coordinator, let's get through this. Whereas now I think, actually, I'm quite comfortable in that conflict environment now. And if we get a good outcome from it, then it's probably worth it. So I suppose those are the things that I've learned really about myself. But it has been an incredibly tough time. It has, for 2 years, and we're not really out of it yet, to be quite honest. But I had a massive responsibility to others that really looked to me to see whether we were doing the right thing or not. We had a few things that happened where I went out front and did it, and then the staff just said, okay, well, Nicky's doing it, it's fine.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it's just, again, really saddened by your loss, and my condolences again. I remember hearing that the first time, and so here you are, senior role in the NHS, turmoil, experiencing something that no one really had a blueprint for, as you said. But also not only navigating this major global challenge, national challenge, local challenge, you were also dealing with your own pain and your own trauma as well. And that must have been really, really tough. That must have been really tough. And what you're talking about, just the self-care, sounds, I often liken it to just putting your oxygen mask on when you're on the plane, right? Just how important that is, that if you're running on empty, then there's nothing you can really give. And so figuring out those ways to reflect, to recharge yourself. And in the midst of your pain, you said you realized you had a responsibility to others. Is that part of what kept you going? Because it would have been easy. I imagine people would have understood if, as you lost your husband, it's, hey, we understand if Nicky's no longer as available. Yeah, what kept you going?
My people. I felt really responsible for my people, and the patients. An even bigger responsibility because families weren't here. And actually, I had a long discussion with my husband, and he was very proud of what I did, and he wanted me to continue. He knew the importance of it and what was happening nationally, and that made him proud, and so that I kept going with it, really. And I think yes, and my team, I think they survived because I was there as well. And I think many of them didn't even know about the situation that was going on. Because I felt that was just, I didn't bring it to work with me, which, because there was too much going on already in the workplace, really. And I felt that they would have felt uncomfortable about coming and asking me things and asking more of me based on what was happening. So my very close team were aware of that, about what was happening. But also, it's just a time like no other. I hope we never see this time again, but it was it's very hard to describe it unless you were in it every single day there was a new challenge every single day. And so it really, a lot of my time was spent problem solving, trying to work out how to do it in a different way, making sure that we had enough protective equipment and that people understood how to use it. The patients, I spent a lot of time talking to the patients because they were very frightened as well, you know. And you know, with the media, and then, you know, we had a number of people that were not believing in COVID, and that was very hard, actually. We had some protesters at the front of the hospital, and because people couldn't see what was happening, and I think that was a difficult part. But it was a bit, I think we were just in a different zone. We came together as a collective leadership group as execs, and we worked really hard together to try and make the right decision and hope that we were making the right decisions. So yeah, I think it is that, about being proud to be a nurse, being proud of what I did, and making sure that I was enabling others to deliver what they needed to do by giving them the resources, the support, and ultimately they would be caring for the patients.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. I was one of the things that I say to leaders is, when you're asking the right sort of questions with the right sort of intentions, that can give you just a real clarity of purpose. And one of those questions is, how can I do the most good? How can I do the most good for the team? How can I do the most good for our patients, our customers? How can I do the most good for organization and world? And that just keeps you moving. And it sounded like you guys were in that place where, as difficult as all of this was, how can we do the most good here? And then we keep going, even if we're not really sure this is something we've never done before. And that keeps you moving. And I can't help but acknowledge as well just the tremendous character that it demonstrated. There's a saying I came across recently: we don't need more people leading who have more power than they have character. We need more great women who lead. We need more great men who lead. And what you've described and how you've led has definitely been a great demonstration of character with that power, which is very inspiring. Very inspiring.
Thank you.
As we just start to wrap up, I think, you know, lots of incredible things that you have shared, and I'd like two questions for you. One is to your younger self. If you could chat with your younger self as you're starting your career 36 years ago and then moving into leadership, and it's particularly when you're at the beginning of your leadership journey, what advice would you give to the younger Nicky based on all that you've experienced now?
So I quite often get asked this when we have newly qualified nurses. They go on a preceptorship course, and I go meet with them. They quite often ask me this. I think it's the self-care. I think that I would have more. I'm not saying I don't have a life balance, but I think I would pay more attention to that. Okay. That the whole resilience. And I use that analogy of the oxygen before the child. And I say that actually, in order to have longevity in these roles and to be able to keep coming and bringing your authentic best self to work, you've got to do the self-care piece. So I think that's the advice that I would give myself, most definitely. Also, I think be braver. So I am quite brave, actually, but I think be braver and stick to what you feel is right. I've got a very strong moral compass, and there have been times when I've quashed it down because I've either wanted to fit in or I haven't felt safe to speak up. And so I would say, be true to yourself and bring your authentic self to work, because you're the only one that's going to look in the mirror at the end of the day to know whether you've done the right thing by people. That's what I would. So I suppose those two things is what I would say.
So that self-care, recharge, and then being braver as well. That's so brilliant. Fantastic. And then final question then is, where, as you 36 years of experience, where do you see yourself in a few years as a leader? What's something that you feel I haven't quite achieved yet that I might want to?
So I could retire next year, and believe you me, I've really thought about it on occasion. I think I would like to, so in the past I've done a number of things of mentoring young women. I've done some work for the refuge. So I think I see myself as using my skills and the piece that I really enjoy about my role, the coaching, to do something very positive with the community. So I've thought of a number of things when I've retired about, I'd really like to I live by the sea, I live in Torquay, by the seaside. I've thought about doing a social enterprise of a cafe and having learning disability people work there and give them an opportunity to work. So I know that my life, even if I retire from the NHS, will be about helping others, because that's what I think you have to do, what gives you joy. And that does. So those kind of things, and mentoring, and if I could do coaching all day, that's what I would do, because that's the bit that I really enjoy. I get a lot back from that, and seeing people develop. And somebody that I coached some years ago said to me, and it stayed with me for a long time, said, the thing about Nicky is you go and see Nicky and you come out and you think you can do anything. And if you can give that and bottle that and give it to people, then that's what I would do. So I think going forward, I think I want to focus on the things that really give me joy. These roles are really hard, very complex, very challenging. Healthcare is not getting any more simple, it's getting more complex. So I think I would like to sort of move to more system-wide working. What does that look like if we work together as health and social care and voluntary sector? What would that actually look like if we had no barriers? Because during the pandemic we saw this work, because all of a sudden everybody just come together, and it was amazing what we managed to change. We changed things that we've been trying for years to change.
Wow.
Because we were all, and this is the thing, isn't it, about change, isn't it? Everybody was trying to sort COVID. So for once, everybody had got the same mission in mind, and it's got rid of all the boundaries of, well, that's my organisation and that's my money, and we literally came together and said, we got to sort this. We've got this wicked problem. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
So I think for me is that, and then and retire. But my children say you'll never be able to retire. You'll be having a franchise of cafes, and So because I know that I seem to attract like organising stuff and things, and I've done it all my life. So, but I think that's where I would like to be going, is doing the stuff that gives me joy.
Yeah. Now that's brilliant. And again, just that theme of serving and making a difference to others, and I love it if more leaders could have that experience and that mindset, that when people interact with them and leave them, that they feel they could do anything. They feel they've been understood. They feel they've been given permission to bring more of their best selves to life and to the world and to their organization. So that's absolutely incredible. Nicky, it's been a delight speaking with you, hearing your story, lots of incredible insights for all of our listeners and viewers. So thank you so much for sharing openly and honestly and vulnerably as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me, Obi.
You're welcome. And to listeners and viewers, I'm sure you enjoyed that. Hope you did as much as I did. And remember that if you want to be a courageous and resilient leader, if you want to live life on purpose and with purpose, then it starts from the inside out. Have a great day. See you on the next show. And Nicky, thanks again for joining me today.